Hello, I'm Dr. Mary Wilde of Imagine Pediatrics Behavioral Health and Wellness, and today I'm going to share with you 3 pediatricians' top tips for thriving despite the pandemic. So first, I will share some of my tips, then I have a special guest to bring on, another pediatrician who has done a lot of work with helping families be educated in the pandemic, and then I'll tell you about a third pediatrician's work. So if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to continue to get relevant information about parenting and kids' health. So first of all, here are some of my ideas that I feel that parents really need to just kind of simplify their approach. And if you focus on some of these few tips, I think you will be good. So the first thing is to optimize general health. You know, all those things that we have been talking about for a long time about eating well, sleeping well, and moving our bodies, those things are always true. And they're even more true now that we can optimize our health. I'll mention towards the end that I do have a free ebook, and it's talking about optimizing our immune function. And so the resources for that will be located in the details of this video. And it's kind of a myth to think that we can, somehow magically boost our immunity, but yet we can certainly optimize it by having healthy lifestyle and getting all the nutrients that we need. So that's the first thing. The second thing is accept incongruities. I think as parents, sometimes we get stressed out when we feel like, oh, but I decided this one thing in this circumstance, and then in this other circumstance, I decided something different, and it doesn't necessarily make sense. But the pandemic itself is something that doesn't make complete sense, and the information is changing. And in every situation, we have a risk-benefit question that we personally need to answer. And so I think we need to be okay with there being some incongruities sometimes. Sometimes we'll say that it's worth it for us to participate in an activity, and sometimes we'll say it's not. And we don't have to defend that and be completely streamlined with all our choices, but we just have to make the wisest choices and the most informed choices that we can in every given circumstance. The next thing I'd like to highlight is the importance of addressing anxiety, because I think that as we acknowledge that anxiety is so prevalent right now, we might start feeling like it's not worth it to address it because, everybody's anxious right now. But this is actually the perfect time to address anxiety and help our kids gain those coping skills and strategies, and model to them that we are doing the same. The fourth thing is just to be extra kind to yourself as a parent, because this is a really hard time, and we have so many more responsibilities than we have ever had as parents. And so it's so important to do that self-care and to be maybe cutting down on some of the commitments and acknowledging that we're maybe not going to be as productive in every way right now, and that's okay. The fifth thing is that all along, we can be acknowledging to our kids that this isn't necessarily normal. I think especially with our younger kids, that we can acknowledge to them, well, maybe, for example, if we are outside and we are telling them, let's stay on our side of the path because we want to physically distance from other people, acknowledging that this is not a normal thing and we're only doing it because of coronavirus, and when coronavirus settles, then we will be able to go back to the norm. But that being said, we may need to do some re-education after things do settle with the pandemic. Because, for example, my youngest son, who's 5, he just expects to stay apart from people outside of our family unit. And that's not a normal expectation. So as things open up, I may need to help guide him to be more comfortable being closer to strangers in a crowd, or being with bigger groups, and just be communicating all along that this is what we're doing because of coronavirus, but it's not necessarily the norm. So those are some of my tips. And if you go to drmarywilde.com, the link is in the video description. I have several resources that may be helpful to you. For example, the ebook, it's called Super Immune: Optimizing Kids' Health During COVID-19. And then I also have a flow parenting ebook that's just about kind of resetting your parenting and kind of learning to relax and enjoy parenting again, even though we all have been super stressed. There's also an anxiety course. So there's several things on that page. And if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, there's also, it's called a Fusion Immune Kids Pack. And it's just some recommended supplements that can be helpful to help our immune systems function optimally. So as I mentioned, I have two other pediatricians' work that I'd like to highlight. The first one is Dr. Kelly Freiden, and she has written a book called Parenting, or How to Parent in a Pandemic, and it's such a great resource. So I'm going to actually bring her in, and she is going to talk to us about that wonderful book. I'm so excited. So let's say hi to Kelly. Here she is.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Hi.
So I loved hearing the story of how you wrote this book, like early mornings, late at night, that you felt really driven to get this information out to families. So what I've seen in your book is just a lot of really helpful information about understanding COVID-19, understanding how it spread, understanding how to make choices about risk, and how to go about our daily lives. Can you highlight a few things that you think are the most valuable from your book?
Gosh, I'm sorry that was going in and out a little, but
Oh, okay.
I couldn't quite hear. But I'd love to share some tips. And I think there's two main ways in which I try to help in the book. And one is that, I think that people forget to take care of the parents. And I think the pandemic has been very hard on parents who are getting by, doing more than ever for their children with less support. And so I try to support the parents through one of their most difficult um, responsibilities, which is making decisions. So I think that in the book, the first half of the book is really about the science of coronavirus, how it's spread, what the tests are, how the tests work, what the risk levels are depending on your medical conditions. And I provide that background so that people can have more confidence as they approach the choices that they're making. And we're all making so many choices. So, so that is one part of it. I'm sorry, somebody is trying to get me. So, so we talk about how to make decisions a lot and how to protect the parents, because for most people, most families, the parents are the higher risk compared to other family members. Like when you compare a 4-year-old and a 40-year-old, the 40-year-old is at nearly 100 times higher risk from coronavirus. So I think it's important for parents to know these things so they can make the right decisions for their family and feel confident in them. Um, so that is one piece, and then the other piece is about setting the tone for your family. So once you make these choices, you're not alone in them. You have to sell them to your family members and explain them to others in your community, and really like feel justified and confident in how you proceed. So I try to give some really practical tips about how to handle that, how to talk to your child. Like you were saying, so many kids are anxious. So how can we say that we're doing all these things and we're not doing them so we won't get sick, or we're not doing them to be safe, but we're doing them to give back to our community and to be good neighbors and put a tone on it that won't increase our children's anxiety. So there's a lot of tips like
Mhm.
that try to make it easier for parents to share these decisions with their families and speak to their children in a way to give their children confidence and reinforce the values that are important to them rather than just using like kind of fear to motivate.
Yes. I think that's so important. And I love how in the book you talk about how we all thought we were doing a sprint, but then we've discovered that we're doing a marathon. And that changes our pace and it changes our approach. Like there's a whole different training approach for doing a sprint race versus a marathon. And so we have to step back and make sure that our approach is sustainable and get the support we need as parents and feel confident that whatever we decide, it might not look like how our neighbors are making choices. It might not look how like other family members are making choices, but we have to have that confidence and just be able to stand in that. So I love that. And I know that on a previous interview you did, you talked a little bit about the idea of decision fatigue. Could you talk a little bit about that and how parents can get through that?
Yes, absolutely. So we're all making so many decisions, and the decisions feel like they have a lot more consequence than what we're used to. Getting sick with coronavirus is very serious, obviously. So, two main ways I suggest are to come up with like an algorithm. So, when doctors make decisions, we make hundreds of decisions in the course of our day, but we're not always relearning the wheel. Often what we're deciding is whether or not a child fits the algorithm that we already have in mind. So you see a child with fever and sore throat, you're not going back to square one of like, what's the cause of fever and sore throat? You're thinking like, oh, is this a strep case or not?
Yeah.
And so in a similar way, parents can set ground rules for their family, like right now we're okay doing anything outdoors with friends because our community incidence is reasonable.
Mhm.
Um, and then instead of deciding about every single thing that comes up, you can decide like, is that indoors or not? Like, I already know what my decision will
Right.
be. Then I'm only deciding, does it fit my plan or not, or is it worth making an exception for? So
Right.
that makes you make less decisions. And I
Mhm.
think also one thing I encourage people to do is make decisions when they have the energy for them and kind of move forward. Often I find that we struggle the most about decisions where both options are okay. When the options are nearly equivalent, it's very hard to make a decision, and there's a lot of that going around too.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think whether you're deciding about school or about the holidays, you make your decision and you move forward, and and try to find peace in that. You're doing the best you can.
That's right. And when we are making decisions in the face of unknowns, we can't sometimes know, will this be 17% better than this other option? We just have to, I love how you said, live forward. Just go forward, make the decision, and then go forward. So I have put a link to Dr. Freiden's book in the video description, and I would recommend it to all of you. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. You can also find Kelly on Instagram at Advice I Give My Friends. Is that right? So she has a lot of helpful tips there as well. So thank you so much for being with us. And you can feel free to stay, or I know that you have a child who may be waking up from a nap at any moment. So you can also, um,
Yes, I'm gonna run.
yeah, you can also run and I will tell
But
them.
thanks so much for having
Yeah,
me and connecting.
thank you. Thank you. And then I'll also share information about a third pediatrician's resources. So another colleague of mine, her name is Elisa Song, and she is a holistic pediatrician, and she has also shown up so well to support families dealing with coronavirus issues. So, and her kids, she talks very publicly about how her kids got coronavirus and how that impacted her and how she had to exist as not only the pediatrician, but as the mom. And so she really felt the angst that goes along with this and was able to see how this can play out really in a personal way. So her resources are at, they're referenced in the notes, healthykidshappykids.com. And she has a blog with a lot of helpful information. And she also has a masterclass that she does, and even does weekly live updates for families that want to ask her questions. And she goes about it in a very natural way. So she talks about, different herbs and different homeopathic resources that can be useful. So kind of wherever you are in the spectrum of, classic pediatrics versus more holistic view, hopefully these resources that we've shared, both from my site, drmarywilde.com, Dr. Freiden's book and her Instagram account, and Dr. Elisa Song with her blog and master classes, hopefully your bases will be covered. I know that there's so many resources that are out there, and sometimes that in itself can feel very overwhelming. And so I want you to be able to have the freedom and permission to just select the things that are useful for you and just kind of let go of the rest, because there's so many resources out there, and I'm sharing with you some of my favorite things, and I hope that they're useful to you. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you can check out the links in the video description. Stay well.